There's a moment that comes after you realize something isn't right. Not everything is unsafe, but something doesn't fully land. If you listened to the last episode, you probably know that feeling. That subtle tightening, that quiet hesitation, the moment where your body says something and you're not sure if you are ready to hear it. This is Spirit and Scrutiny podcast, where we explore the sacred with open hearts and discerning minds. I am your host, Flower. I want to talk about what happens after that moment, because realizing something doesn't feel right is one thing, but staying with yourself after that is something else entirely. There's a space that opens up right after you notice something, and it's not clear, it's not resolved, you don't have answers yet. You just have a feeling. And this is where most patterns take over. You either talk yourself out of it, make it make sense, decide it's not a big deal, or you go the other direction. You shut down, you pull away, you leave before you have to feel anything. And both of these, in their own ways, are forms of leaving yourself. One looks like staying. One looks like leaving. But underneath both is the same thing. Not staying with what is actually true for you. For a long time, I thought trusting myself meant being certain, being clear, being confident, knowing exactly what to do. But that is not what it feels like. Most of the time, trusting yourself feels quiet, uncertain, sometimes even inconvenient, because it doesn't always align with what's easiest, or what is familiar, or what you have been taught to choose. And so, there's this moment where you feel both directions at once. The pull to stay where you've always stayed, and the pull towards something that feels more honest, but less comfortable. And that moment is where everything starts to change. Not because you suddenly know what to do, but because you don't leave yourself in it. You stay. Not in the situation, but with yourself. And that kind of staying can feel unfamiliar, because you actually have to feel what's there. The uncertainty, the second guessing, the part of you that wants to go back to what is known, and the part of you that knows you cannot do that the same way anymore. And I want to be really honest here. Staying with yourself does not feel empowering at first. It does not feel strong. It does not feel clear. Sometimes it it just feels uncomfortable. Like you're sitting in something without a way out yet. And if I'm being even more honest, that is usually the exact moment I would have chosen something quickly. Not because it was right, but because I did not want to feel that. I didn't want to sit in the not knowing. I certainly did not want to risk being wrong. I didn't want to disrupt something that looked like it should work. So I would have stayed, or I would have left. But either way, I wouldn't have actually stayed with myself. And that has been the hardest part to see. Not the big moments, but the quiet ones where I knew just enough and still chose something else. And that part of me isn't gone. It is still there. It still shows up. Still tries to take over in subtle ways. Still tries to make sense of things so I don't have to sit in what I feel. But now I can feel when it's happening. And that is the difference. Not that I always get it right, but that I notice, that I pause, that I don't move as quickly to override what I feel. And sometimes that pause is all I have. No clarity, no answer, no clean decision. Just the awareness that something isn't right, and the choice to not leave myself in it. And I've started to notice this in smaller moments too. Not the big, obvious ones, the ones that are easy to justify, the ones that don't look like a problem on the outside. Everything seems fine, looks normal, even good. And yet, something in me doesn't fully settle. I used to ignore that because it wasn't strong enough to justify a decision. It wasn't clear enough to explain. And it did not make logical sense. So I would stay where I was, or I would move forward anyway. And I would just tell myself that I was overthinking. But what I've been noticing now is that those smaller moments matter. That subtle hesitation is not nothing. That quiet, I don't know about this, is actually something. Even if I can't name it yet. Even if I cannot explain it. And instead of trying to figure it out immediately, I have been letting myself stay in that moment a little longer. Not deciding right away, not forcing it to make sense, just noticing, staying. And that has been a shift because it means I am not abandoning myself in the subtle ways anymore. Not just in the big, obvious moments, but in the quiet ones that used to slip right past me. That's where this really starts to change. Not when everything is clear, but when you start to honor what you feel, even when it isn't. Even when it is inconvenient, when it complicates things, even when it means something might have to change. That is what trust actually starts to look like. Not certainty, not confidence, but staying. Staying long enough to hear yourself. Staying long enough to feel what is true. Staying long enough that when you do move, it is coming from something real. And over time, that changes something. You don't leave yourself as quickly. You don't override what you feel just to keep something steady. You don't explain things away as easily as you used to. And it's not perfect. There will be moments where you second guess yourself, where you wonder if you're making it all up, where you almost go back to what's familiar. But even then, there is a part of you now that notices. And that part matters. Because trust does not come from always getting it right. It comes from not abandoning yourself, even when it matters. Even in the small ways. In the quiet moments. And sometimes, even in the shift that isn't visible to anyone else. Nothing dramatic happens. You don't make a big move. You don't say something out loud. But internally, something is different. You stayed. And that stays with you. So, if you are in a moment like that right now in life, where something doesn't feel fully right, but you don't know what to do yet, you don't need to rush it. You don't need to force clarity. You do not need to have the answer today. Choose to stay with yourself, even if it is uncomfortable, even if it is unclear, even if a part of you still wants to run like hell. Choose to stay. that's where it starts. Let's take a breath together now as we wind down this episode. Inhale slowly through your nose. Exhale gently through your mouth. Notice what is present for you right now without trying to change it or name it. Whatever is there, you can stay with it. You don't have to leave yourself to move through this. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, stay grounded, and keep asking the questions that bring you closer to the truth.